Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. So happy to have you tuning in. If this is your first time here, welcome. If you're here as a return listener, thank you so much for, continuing to listen and to support this. So let's get right into it tonight. I was doing some thinking about how we really don't do a great job of giving each other the benefit of the doubt. And we don't really do a great job of always, assuming the best of people. And I don't really know what got me thinking about this, probably because we're, coming up on the holiday season. We just had Thanksgiving, a time that really should make all of us, reflect and think about things we should be grateful for, and think about the people that are important to us in life. So I don't know if that's what got me thinking about it, or potentially also, as I mentioned maybe a talk or two ago, I just hit the year anniversary of when my one horse had to have emergent colic surgery, and that was obviously traumatic and obviously an emotional time, and it was real touch and go for a while, and didn't know how things were going to turn out. So going through it in real time was really difficult. And I remember, so when, I don't live in the same state as most of my closest family, so we do a lot of communication via the phone, obviously, but we're very close, and everybody knows how much the horses mean to me, and blah, blah, blah. So when this happened last year, and the horse was going into surgery, I texted on our group family text, I texted everyone, hey, Cheyenne is colicking and she's going in for emergency surgery, and I don't know what's going to happen. Things are potentially not looking good. And, I sent that message, and I really didn't get a lot of response to it. And then didn't get any follow-up responses or texts or questions or phone calls the next day either. And, it really broke my heart. And granted, of course, I'm an emotional wreck because of what's going on with the horse. So I'm already at a kind of a no emotional coping reserve kind of standpoint, but I just remember that hurt my heart so much. I just was so sad that, these people that I care so much about, and I had always thought cared so much about me and all this stuff, that they weren't even thinking enough of the situation to make it a point to even send me a text message, right? So that was hard to deal with. But I knew I was emotional. I knew I was upset, because of the whole situation in general. So I didn't take any action on it right away. I just told myself, I said, look, there must be an explanation, something's weird's going on. These aren't the people that I know. And I just said, I'll deal with it tomorrow. So next day comes around, and I call my family, and I kind of say, hey, why hasn't anyone reached out? What's going on? And come to find out, they were texting me, and the texts weren't going through. And some of the texts I was texting them with updates and things like that, those weren't going through. I had coincidentally just gotten a new phone probably a week before all this happened, and I guess, I'm not the IT savvy person in the family, but I guess something with the settings were going on, and the texts were not crossing over between iPhones and non-iPhones, and they were just getting lost out there, somewhere in space. So I'm bringing this up because we should give each other the benefit of the doubt. We should assume the best of people, especially when it's people that we know, that we have relationships with, and, people who we feel like we know who they are as human beings. If something seems out of character, or if something doesn't make sense, or they do something that you wouldn't do, or doesn't make sense to you, or vice versa, our first reaction shouldn't be jumping to a bad conclusion. Our first reaction should be, let me give this person the benefit of the doubt. Let me give this situation the benefit of the doubt. Let me assume there's something I'm not seeing, or something I'm not understanding, or maybe they know something I don't know, and so that's why it's not making sense to me, or, there's an explanation for what's going on. Any and all of the above. On average, we have gone from a society that expects or thinks the best of people to one that expects and thinks the worst of people. And don't get me wrong, sometimes people do bad things, and sometimes people do things that aren't good and that do hurt other people. So it's not to say that everything everyone does is an act of kindness, but it should be kind of a innocent until proven guilty sort of situation. Like, why do we just jump to the worst conclusion for people? Like, why do we jump to the worst case scenario? Why do we jump to, oh, they did this on purpose to hurt me, or they did this because they don't care, or, whatever the case may be. And, this story I'm telling about last year, this was a technology slip up, and, we thought it was literally loss in communication. Like, we thought we were communicating, and literally the messages were just lost somewhere. And so it was the true definition of miscommunication and misunderstanding. And, I'm so grateful that I did not jump to just worst case scenario, worst case conclusion right off the bat. In the real time, my feelings were definitely hurt, but I recognized, hey, like, you need to take a pause, and you need to just, in a calm manner, ask what's going on, because this does not really align with these people that you know and have a relationship with, and, there must be an explanation, which is exactly what I did. It's not like I dismissed it and didn't bring it up. I just asked about it. I said, hey, what is going on? And lo and behold, there was a real explanation. And actually, my family was feeling kind of hurt as well, because they thought they were texting me asking for updates, and I was just ignoring them and blowing them off. So, it was a two-way street of miscommunication and misunderstanding. And if nobody would have said anything about it, nobody ever would have known, and we couldn't have figured out what was going on. And, people can hold on to stuff like that, and for no reason, because there was a perfectly good explanation as to what was happening. And it doesn't have to be dropped text messages because, the phone's messed up. Like, it doesn't have to be that. It can also be that, people sometimes do things or respond or react in a way that maybe we don't understand, or maybe is not what we need or what we want, just for 1,000 reasons. Like, maybe they don't have all the information that we have, or maybe they have different information than we have, or maybe they don't understand how we're perceiving the situation, or, maybe they're looking at things differently, from a different viewpoint, from a different vantage point. Like, maybe they have a rhyme to their reason, like they have a reason for doing what they're doing. And I think we just need to try to be better at just giving people that benefit of the doubt. And if something doesn't make sense to you, or somebody's doing something that you don't really understand, or doesn't align with how you would do it or how you want it done, like, instead of just jumping to a negative conclusion and just jumping to a thought of, oh, they're a bad person, or oh, they don't care, or oh, they're stupid, or any of those negative things, instead of jumping in that conclusion, talk to them about it. Like, be like, hey, why did you do that the way you did it? Let them shed light on the situation, or give them the opportunity to clear up a misunderstanding if that's what it was. The point is, we shouldn't just assume the worst of someone. We should give people the benefit of the doubt and assume that there is a reason that they're doing whatever they're doing, or not doing whatever they're doing. So that was just a little something I was thinking about. Like I said, we're coming up on the holidays. We just had Thanksgiving. It's a time to be grateful for all the good stuff in our life, the good people in our life, the people around us. And we should honor each other by assuming the best of each other and giving each other a break when we need to give each other a break. I was just thinking of another story, and this is from many years ago, but I just remember it so vividly. Like I've mentioned on here before, I work in healthcare. I worked full-time in hospitals for many years. Anyway, I was making rounds with one of the doctors that I worked with, and we're in this patient's room, and the patient was, look, when people are in the hospital, they're not the best version of themselves, right? Like, they're sick, they're hurt, they're sad, they're stressed, they're not the best versions of who they are. And if you work in healthcare, you know that, or at least you should know that, and you should treat people accordingly, and you should give them some grace. So I'm used to being yelled at by patients. It's not a new thing. Like, they just are in a bad time of their life, and they need to lash out at someone, and the hospital staff is there for them to lash out on sometimes. So anyway, we're in this room with this patient, and the patient's just unhappy that they have to have surgery, unhappy with the amount of pain that they're in, unhappy with the food at the hospital, just unhappy about everything. And they were just really letting us know how they feel, and, yelling at us and saying some mean things and this, that, and the other. But then the patient said to the doctor I was working with, they said, you don't understand. You don't understand what it's like to be sick. You don't understand what it's like to have someone that you love sick, and that's why you don't get it. And, just kind of went off to say some more nasty things. And we just stood there like we usually do, and we just said, we listened, we heard what they were saying, tried to comfort them, all the normal stuff. And then we left the room. But what the important part of this story is that doctor that I worked with at that time, his wife was actually dying of terminal cancer. And I just remember that experience and that situation like it was yesterday, because when that patient said to him, you don't understand what it's like to have someone you love sick, the doctor didn't say anything, of course. It's not about him. Like, he's just trying to take good care of his patient. But I knew that his wife was dying of terminal cancer. And I just remember that, like I said, like it was yesterday. We never know what other people are going through in their life. Like, you never know what someone else is dealing with. You never know what kind of news they got that morning. You never know what is on their agenda tomorrow. You never know what is going on in their life. And all of us should give each other a little bit of grace, because you just never know what that other person is dealing with. And they might not be the best version of themselves, because they might be dealing with something really terrible. Or, they might not understand where you're coming from, because they might just be living a very different phase of their life than you are. So we're products of our own experiences, and we're products of what is going on in our daily life with, our circle of people and things that are closest to us. And that's going to shape every ounce of who we are and how we behave and how we act and what we do, and the mistakes we make and the times we might slip up and not be the best versions of ourselves. Like, it shapes everything. So just assume, when you're interacting with someone, just know that you're not privy to everything they're dealing with, they're going through, what their life is like right now. Like, you don't know any of it. So let's give each other, all of us, let's give each other a little bit of grace. Let's understand that sometimes, things happen that we don't understand, or somebody does something that we don't really can't make a lot of sense of, and just give each other the benefit of the doubt. Like, maybe that person's going through something that you don't know about. Maybe that person knows something that you don't know, or maybe that person doesn't have all the information that you have. We just got to give each other a little more grace and a little more kindness, and just to try to assume the best of people. A little bit of kindness goes a long way sometimes. All right, well, thank you so much for tuning in, and if you like this podcast, please come back and visit again. Share it if you think you know somebody who might like to listen as well. And everyone have just a great rest of your day. All right, thanks. Bye.